Okay, let's get rolling. So, we talked about last time things like control flow and that sort of thing. We did the bottles of root beer, as you may recall. Um, so, I'm going to assign you two different things today. Uh, one of actually before I say that, what what did I assign you last time? Did I assign the bottles of root beer last time, or was that the time before? That was last time. Okay. Did we went over the video on the toggle menu, right? We watched the first part of that, but we didn't watch the second half. Is that correct? Or was that in the other class? Anybody have any idea what I'm talking about? How to do the hamburger menu? No? Okay. Okay. So that must have been in the other class. That's what happens when you teach two different sections of a class. You tend to forget what you do in what individual class. So in that case, we're going to skip this one, and we will do that next week, perhaps. So in that case, we are
Today we're going to do another project
about
using Java.
how to do a toggle menu, okay, which is to say a scenario where you have a little hamburger menu, right? The little square with the three lines, and you tap it, and your menu slides out, right? We're probably going to need that in mobile app with Cordova, right? Well, probably wouldn't hurt for us to go over that now. Almost as though I knew what I was doing when I planned these things out. So we're going to go over that. We're also going to go over, okay, so does that mean then, we actually may not have time to do that. I don't know. We'll see. Either way, we're definitely going over the toggle menu. We may also go over objects and object constructors and things like that today. Because then next time, we're going to learn how to create a simple game using JavaScript. Now, if you're a real go-getter and you want to do this as your project for this semester, I'm just kind of putting the bug in your ear now. I have a book that I will loan you. Well, actually, it's an ebook, so I guess I'll send you a copy of it. But I've got an ebook to give you, or that I will give you, that explains how to create your own game engine using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Okay, so if you want to be a real go-getter, you're certainly welcome to make that your project. Now, that's pretty advanced. That's actually pretty close to being on the scope of a software engineering project. But if you want to gather together with some friends and make that your project for the semester, that would be totally fine with me. Okay, so without further ado, let's hop over here and let's check out how to create a toggle menu, part one here in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript.
Today we're going to do another project using JavaScript, and this is something I think is important for us to do in between these lessons here, because you need to not just see how to create JavaScript, but you also need to see how we can actually use it inside a real website. Now, in the previous project we created a calculator, which wasn't the most exciting thing to create using JavaScript, so in this episode we're going to create something much more exciting than a calculator. So as you can see in front of me here, I did already build the project we're going to make for these two episodes, and we're going to make a toggle menu inside this website here. Now, a toggle menu is a menu that you can open and close using a button. You've probably seen that before on a cell phone or a tablet when you want to open up the menu, and this is what we're going to build for this episode here. Now, just to demonstrate, if we were to go in here and click this button, you can see that we open up a menu on the left side. If we were to click it again, we close it again. And this is something we can simply build using JavaScript, and this is a perfect project for us to start out with when we want to see a real example on a real website using JavaScript. So what I have in here, if we were to just erase everything because we need to start at new, is I have a basic index page that has nothing inside of it except for a reset style sheet. And again, you should know what a reset style sheet is from the HTML course on my channel or from somewhere else. If you don't know what that is, I will link a lesson on it in the description. And I also have a style sheet linked to it underneath it here. Now, as you can see, I don't actually have any styling inside my style sheet because that's something we're going to make together in this episode. And we're also going to make the HTML markup inside the index page in this episode. And the JavaScript code is something we're going to make in the next episode. So my main.js file, which I already created, is completely empty as well because we don't have any JavaScript in this episode. So I'm going to go back into my index.html page, and we're going to create that first, because we need to think about what exactly we want to do using JavaScript before we set up the HTML markup inside our website. So taking a look at our website, you can see that right now I have a bar at the top here that has a button inside of it, and then the primary menu of this website. We also have the black bar on the side here, which is going to be a separate element inside our index page. So that is going to be a simple element we're going to position on the side, and it's going to change width when we click the button inside the website. So that is what we need to create first of all inside our index page. So if we were to go inside the index page here, we're going to start by making the navigation at the top of the website. So I'm going to create first of all a nav tag, which is going to be the bar that goes from left to right of the website at the top. Now, before we jump to the style sheet, I do want to create the content for the navigation first. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a div box that is going to be the button that we click on in order to open and close the navigation. And I'm just going to go ahead and give this div box a background image in order to get the look for the button. So I'm just going to go ahead and close it off here without inserting anything in between the div tags. And then afterwards, I'm going to create a unordered list that is going to contain the navigation that you see at the top there. Now, this navigation is not really important for our small project here. It's just something I create for aesthetics look. So you don't need to create this navigation if you don't want to. But I'm just going to go ahead and copy paste it from my cheat sheet over here on the side. So I have a really quick navigation. And again, a navigation is something that is very basic for HTML, so you should know how to create it by now. So now we have a div box, we have a navigation, and we also have a unordered list with a bunch of menu items. Now let's actually go ahead and style this specific piece of content inside the website. So if we were to go inside the nav text, I do want to create a class that I'm going to call nav main, just so we have some sort of styling that we can hook onto in order to style the elements inside this specific container. So I'm going to save it. And then I want to give my div box a class, and I want to set it to button toggle nav, just to have some kind of name for it. So I want to say btn dash toggle dash nav. And it's also a name that we can look at and then see what exactly this div element does inside the website. Now, we're not completely done with this div box here, but I do want to return to it a bit later when we do get started on the JavaScript code for this website. So for now, I'm just going to go ahead and leave it here. So now that we have this, we can actually go ahead and style the navigation at the top there. So I'm going to go inside my style sheet, and inside the style sheet, we're just going to go ahead and so the dog just crawled from under the desk and sat behind me. So apparently he's going to be part of the lesson now in my face cam. So inside my style sheet here, the first thing I want to do is I want to change the background color of the entire website, because I do want to see the menu we have at the top there. So I'm going to style my body tag from inside the website, and I'm going to give it a background color, background dash color, and I do want to set it to something like F1, 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 which is a very light gray color. So we're going to say hashtag F1, 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 and we're going to go ahead and save it. Then afterwards, we're going to go ahead and style the actual navigation. So we're going to say we had a class called nav-main, and inside of here, I do want to set a width to 100% because I want to go all the way from left to right. And I do also want to have a height set to 60 pixels. I do want to have a background color, and I do want to set the background color to something like white, so we can actually see what's going on inside the navigation. And I do also want to create a flex display inside the navigation so we can actually align our content in the proper way. Again, if you don't know about Flexbox, it's something I have a episode on in my HTML course, so I do recommend you go back and watch that episode if you don't know what Flexbox is inside a website. And again, I will link it in the description of this video. So we're going to create a display as flex. So apparently got a bit shy and crawl away from the camera, but that's fine with me. So what flex does is that it allows for us to display items next to each other instead of us using float left, which is what we used in the past. So today we have something called flex instead, and I do want to set my flex wrap to wrap, so our content goes next to each other inside the menu. So underneath here, I do also want to create a set index because this is a menu. It needs to always be on the top. So I do want to create a set index for 1000, just to have something. Afterwards, we're going to go ahead and create the button styling. He just can't sit down. I don't know if you can hear him right now, but he's moving around quite a lot and making a lot of noise. So I'm just going to go ahead and pause until I think he laid down now. Good. Yikes. Okay, so the next thing we need to style is the actual button that goes inside the navigation. So we're going to say we have a class called button dash, or what do we call it? Toggle dash nav. And inside of here, we're going to say we have a width set to 60 pixels. We have a height set to, we could set it to 60 or 100% because the height of the navigation is in fact 60 pixels. And we're also going to go ahead and set a background color. Now I do already have a background color chosen, which is a orange color. And it's going to be, if you want to get the same, what do you call it, color code in hex, it's going to be F98 F39. Again, it's being so loud. The next thing we're going to create is the background image. Now I do already have a background image chosen inside my root folder, and just to show you if I were to go into it, actually I don't have it, so I'm just going to go ahead and copy it from my example that we just saw in the browser. Inside my image folder, I do already have an image which is just called menu.png, and this is just a simple transparent image of, you know, those 3 bars that we usually have inside a menu. So that's what I'm going to use as a background image for this example here. So inside the background image styling, I'm going to go ahead and say we have a URL, and the link is going to be to my image folder to a menu.png. And afterwards, I do want to set the repeat for the image to no repeat, because we don't want the image to repeat over and over again inside this div box. So I do want to say background repeat and set it to no repeat. I do also want to set a background size to 100%. Actually, no, let's not set it to 100%. Let's set it to 40, because if I were to set it to 100% just to show you, let's go ahead and do that. And we're also going to go ahead and set a background position. Again, I'm looking at my cheat sheet over here, to center, just to make sure it doesn't move around. And we also need to make sure that when we put our cursor on top of this image or this div box, that we still get the little, you know, hand link icon for the mouse. So we do also need to set a cursor to pointer. So now that we have this, let's actually go and check it out inside the browser. So I'm going to open up my website because I haven't actually done that yet. I'm going to open it with Chrome. And as you can see, we right now have a menu that hasn't been styled yet. We also have the white navigation bar. And the image inside my orange box is way too big. So we're going to size it down to about 40% instead of 100%. Like so. And now you can actually see we have the proper size for the background image inside the button. My dog is moving around again. It's so obnoxious. So hopefully he's just going to stay there. So the next thing we need to do is we need to style the actual navigation inside this nav bar. And I know some of you might not have included it inside the index page. If you didn't, then just don't do the styling for it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure it looks the proper way. So I'm going to go underneath here inside my style sheet, and I'm going to go ahead and style the nav-main, which is the entire navigation bar. And then I'm going to pinpoint to the unordered list inside the navigation bar. Now inside of here, we're going to set a display set to flex. And the reason I'm doing so is because I want to align my menu items next to each other using flexbox instead. So I'm going to go ahead and say we want to do a flex-wrap, and set it to wrap. Then I do also want to just shift out my navigation slightly from the left side so it's not all the way up against the button. So I do want to give it a padding to the left of 15 pixels. So if we were to go ahead and refresh, you can see that we now have the items next to each other and they're not touching the button, which is good. The next thing we need to do is we need to style the individual items inside this unordered list. So we're going to go down to next line. I'm just going to copy what we have up here. And I'm going to target the list items instead. And I'm just going to go and copy and paste again, because I do also want to target the links inside the list items. So I'm going to say we have a link, and I'm just going to go and remove all the styling from inside these two sections here, like so. The first thing we want to do inside the list item is that we want to set a list style to none. So we don't have any sort of bullet points, anything inside the menu items. And I do also want to set a line height to 60 pixels because the height of my navigation is 60. So in order to center my text inside the navigation, it needs to have a line height set to 60 pixels, of course. So now if we were to refresh it, you can see that it has been centered inside the navigation. So inside my anchor text down here, we do also need to include some styling. I'm going to first of all say we want to set it for display block. So we can give it a height and a width and that sort of thing. So I'm going to set a height to 100%. And I'm also going to go ahead and set a padding because they need to have some distance from one another. I'm going to set a padding to 0 from the top and bottom, and just about maybe 10 pixels from the left and right, like so. And I do also want to include a text transform set to uppercase. So it's not all non-caps or whatever, it's all capitalized. And I do also want to set a text decoration to none, because usually when we use links, they have this underline under it. So I do want to get rid of it. So we're going to set text decoration to none. Just to see what we have so far, you can see that now we have something that looks a bit more like a navigation. I do need to change the styling for the text. So we're going to set a color. And I'm the sort of person who doesn't like to use black, like the complete black 000 hex color. I do want to set it to a very dark gray color because it looks better for the eyes inside a website. So I'm going to choose a hashtag 111 inside the website, and it just moved around again. So now that we have this, we just need to change the font styling. So we're going to say we want to set a font family. Let's actually choose it here. Font family set to Arial. Again, you can just download another font from the internet, but I'm just going to use a standard font for this episode. I do also want to set a font size, and I want to set it to 16 pixels and save it. So now we should have the entire styling for the top navigation here, which is good, and this is what we came here for. There's one more thing I do want to include, which is a hover styling for my button. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy it here. And I do want to set this one to hover. And I want to change the background color. Actually, not the background color. Let's change the opacity. Opacity to something like 0.5. And let's go ahead and save it. And now I can see it changes when we do hover on it. That might have been a bit too much, but now we can actually see we're actually clicking it when we do actually click it. So that's the point here. The next thing we need to create is the black bar that goes on the left side here that is going to open up using JavaScript. And this is what we're actually going to be messing around with when it comes to the JavaScript. So inside my website, you can see that when I click it, it grows in size or in width, and then the text inside the box gets visible. When I click it again, it gets invisible. So that's what we want to create in the style sheet for this specific element here. So first of all, we need to go inside the index page because we haven't actually created the element that is going to open up and close inside the website. So I do want to go down here and create a separate element just below the navigation. And I do want to create a aside element, which is just a basic sidebar inside a website. You could have used a div box too if you wanted to. The element doesn't really matter in this case. And inside the aside, I do want to include a navigation again. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy what I have up here. and paste it in. And I do want to change these around slightly, because first of all, if you were to look at my example, you can see that I have a title for all the links I have down here. So that needs to be a slightly different styling than the other links. So inside my style sheet, I do need to change the styling for the top item. So we need to go ahead and remove the anchor tag. And instead, I'm just going to include a span tag, so we can target this specific menu item here. And then I want to change so we don't have a hyperreference. We don't need that. And then I'm going to include a title, so it says projects. And then we're just going to go ahead and change all the menu points down here. Now I'm just going to copy paste from what I have inside my cheat sheet. And you can just go ahead and pause the video and take your time to actually write all the text in here if you want the same text. You could also just write something random, doesn't really matter. And what we have now is a basic sidebar that is going to open and close when we have something going on with JavaScript. Now I do want to include a class for the aside element. So I want to say class, and I want to set this one to nav-sidebar. So you're going to notice that we have nav main and nav sidebar. So we have two different stylings for two different navigations. So now that we have this, we're actually ready to do some styling to it. So inside my style sheet, I'm going to go all the way to the bottom. Now, before we start styling the sidebar, I do want to do one more thing to the main navigation at the top of the website, which is to give it a position fixed, so that when we were to scroll on the website, it stays at the top of the website. And again, this is basic HTML and CSS, so you should know what position fixed does. So I'm just going to go ahead and do the styling here for it. So inside the nav main, I'm going to say we have a position set to fixed, and then I want the top to be 0, like so. So now if we were to scroll on the website, it's going to stay at the top of the website. So one more thing I want to do here is I want to go down to my sidebar and also give it a position fixed. So I'm going to say we have a styling called nav-sidebar. And inside the sidebar styling, we're going to give it a position set to fixed. And we're going to go ahead and set it to left 0 pixels, or just 0, because you don't need to add pixels behind it when it's 0. And we also need to set it to bottom 0. So now that we have this, we can actually go ahead and create the, what you call the height and the width for this specific box here. So I'm going to set a width to 50 pixels, which is going to make sense in a second, not 60, because what we want to do is we want to align the width of this black box with the button up here, and the button up here is 60 pixels wide, but I do want to add a padding to this line down here to make sure that the text inside the sidebar does not go outside and touch the sides of this menu here. So we do need to add a padding to this black bar. So I'm going to go inside my styling again, and I'm going to set the width to 50 pixels. Then I'm going to set a padding to 0 and 5 pixels. So now we have a 5 pixel padding on the left and right side, which is going to add up to 60 pixels with the width we have here, if that makes sense. So we're also going to go ahead and include a height, and we're going to go ahead and use a new feature in CSS, which is the calc feature. So we're going to calculate, and inside the calc parentheses here, I'm going to set I'm going to take the complete height of the website. So we're going to set 100 view height and minus 60 pixels, because our navigation is 60 pixels tall. So we take the complete height of the website or the browser, and then we subtract 60 pixels from it. So we're going to save it. And lastly here, we're going to give it a background color and set it to, what did I set it to? I set it to 1B, 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 1B. And now if I were to refresh the browser, you can see that now we have a black bar going all the way from the top to the bottom. At least it stops right before the navigation at the top. So now we have all these items inside our sidebar that needs to be styled and hidden when we don't have the sidebar activated and open. So we need to do that using styling as well. So inside the style sheet here, there's one more thing I want to do to the sidebar, which is to first of all give it a set index as 1000. again, just to make sure it doesn't go under the content inside the website. So now that we have this, we can actually go ahead and style the actual content inside our sidebar. So I'm going to go down to the next line. I'm just going to go ahead and copy what I have up here. And I'm going to delete everything from inside what I copied and pasted. And I'm going to add that we have a unordered list. I'm also going to go ahead and add that we have a list item. And I'm also going to go ahead and add that we have a list item and a link. And I do need to make sure we do this the proper way. There we go. Now we also need to remember that I included a span for the title inside the navigation, which is right here. So we do also need to target that using the style sheet. So I'm going to copy what we have here, paste it below, and say we have a span that I want to target. So now we should have all the different stylings for all the items inside the sidebar. So what I want to do now is I want to go up to the UL, and I want to do a little bit of the styling we need to do. There's some more styling we need to apply that I'm going to wait with because I want to show you the effect of it. So right now what we're going to do is we're going to set a padding, set to the top as 15 pixels. Again, just to push it away from the top so it doesn't touch the button at the top there. And then afterwards we're going to go ahead and start the list item, which is down here. Again, we're not done with the UL tag like I mentioned, but we're going to wait with the rest of the styling. And inside the list items, we're going to set a line height to 60 pixels, just so we get something that looks a little bit the same as above. And we're also going to set a list style as none, like so. And that's basically what we need to do with the list items. Now, I just noticed that the styling for the span tag and the anchor tag are going to be completely the same, so we can actually do this in a much better way. So instead of having two separate stylings, we can just copy the path from the bottom one and add it to the top up here. So we can say comma and add the path here. So now we're actually styling the same for both of these items here. So the first thing we're going to do in here is we're going to set a display block. Then we're going to set a height to 60 pixels. And again, if you want to change the height to something a little bit smaller, then you also need to change the line height from up here in order for it to match up inside the website. Just FYI. We're also going to set a padding. We're going to set it to 0 and 10 pixels, just so we have some spacing from the text and the side of the boxes inside up. And we're also going to go ahead and set a text decoration and set it to none, because we don't want to have an underline under the navigation items. And then we want to set a text transform to uppercase, so it matches the top menu at the top there. Then for the actual text styling, we're going to set a color to white, so we're going to say FFF. We're going to set a font family to Arial. We're going to set a font size to 16 pixels. Now, before we continue styling, I do need to show you what exactly we have so far inside the browser, because the rest of the styling we have left in this episode is going to affect the JavaScript in the next episode. So before we do anything, I do need to show you why we need to apply the rest of the styling inside the style sheet. So if I were to go inside the website here and refresh, as you can see, right now we have all the menu items inside our sidebar, but we also have a couple of issues. First of all, the menu items should not be visible. They should be invisible. And second of all, when they're actually visible, you can see that the text is going underneath each other. We do have text jumping to the next line and going under each other, which is not something it should do. So what we need to do using CSS styling is that we need to make sure that the text goes in one line, and we need to force it in one line, even though it can't be inside the container it's inside of. So going into our style sheet, we need to go into our bottom styling here, and we need to set something called white space. So we're going to say white dash space, and we need to set it to no wrap. And what this does is that it makes sure that the text does not jump down to the next line if there's no space for it. So once you go inside the website, refresh, you can now see that everything is going on one line inside the styling here. So it's jumping outside the container, which is what we want it to do. The next styling we're going to apply to this is going to be inside the unordered list styling we have up here. So I want to do the rest of the styling for this unordered list. The first styling is going to be that we want to set a overflow to hidden. So if we were to say overflow hidden, then you can see that if I were to refresh the browser, that if any text goes outside the container, then it's going to be cut off so we can't see it outside the container, which is also something we need to do for this to look properly when we open and close it using JavaScript. So inside the style sheet, the last styling we're going to apply is we're going to hide the content inside this sidebar. So right now, because we haven't actually opened up the menu, we need to make sure that the content is hidden until we click the button. So I'm going to set a styling that is going to be called visibility. And I want to set this one to hidden. And then using JavaScript, when we do actually click the button, I need to change the styling into visible, which we can actually do using JavaScript. We can change all sorts of CSS styling using JavaScript. So this is what we needed to do so far inside the style sheet. We're just going to go ahead and refresh the browser. And as you can see, we can't actually do anything to anything inside the sidebar, which is the goal for this episode here. Now, before we end off the episode, I do want to do one more thing inside the style sheet, which is to make sure that when we hover our mouse on top of the menu in the sidebar, then it also changes something with the background color, just to make sure that we can actually see what we're hovering on. So I do want to copy the path we have here, and I do want to change it to hover, and we can just remove the span part of it because we don't actually need to have that. It's just going to be the links that I want something to happen to. And I want to change the background color. And I want to change it into a dark gray color that is not as dark as the background color for the whole sidebar. So I want to change it to 222, just to give it something. So right now we should have exactly what we want to inside our website when it comes to HTML and CSS. So this was the first part of this episode, and in the next one we're going to learn how to actually create the JavaScript that will in fact open and close this menu that we built using HTML and CSS. So I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next episode.
What's that? Yeah, I know. Yeah, that dog, right? Like that dog just moving around all the time. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take us a break, okay? And the reason we're going to take a break is because we've got another video of about equal length to watch to wrap this up. After we watch that, I'm going to turn you loose to actually make this thing yourself, okay? Now, a couple of quick things before we go on break. Thing number one, did anyone hear him mention Z? He said the Z index. Does anyone know what he's talking about? I feel like Dawn may be the only person who might be able to wager a guess at this. Your wife is from Malaysia. Okay, so I'm not sure how in Malaysia they do it. That's why I was saying you might be. Okay, so in other countries, the last letter of the alphabet is not Z, it is Z. Okay, so he's from Denmark. So you might hear, and several of the people that I show their videos in class are from Sweden, Switzerland, pull your mask up please, Sweden, Switzerland, etc., etc. They will say Z instead of Z. So I don't want you to be thrown by that. So when you do come back and we watch this video, what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you incorporate, as you might guess, this into the website that you've been working on and enhancing and so on and so forth. Now, so you don't fall too far behind, I would recommend during the break getting your website opened up, maybe finding the assets for this video that we just watched. I'll throw the link up there for you so that you can get those and get it, get brackets open and be ready to start working. Now you don't have to; it's not due till next week, but you still don't want to fall too far behind. So the things that you're going to be doing with it, I want you to change the background color of the page that it's on. If you already have a custom background color on your website, which all of you should, congratulations, you have that part done. Change the font of the nav bar as well as the slide out nav bar. Okay. Use a font you acquired from the internet, not one that comes standard in Windows. Change the image that is the button, so instead of the 3 lines, find an image, and you may need to resize it, but find an image of an eagle or of a flower or a heart or something and replace that image. And then add drop-down items to your regular nav bar, not the slide out one, but the regular one. Once again, if you have been working along, you should have that already done. If you don't, no big deal. You'll have plenty of time to get it done. But you should already have made some steps and some strides toward having this done. So That being said, I am going to, let's see, come back at 12:15, and we will watch the next part of our video here. Yep, I heard that. That's what they were saying, that they were gonna be announcing BC now. BC Classic. Now I have heard the sort of the rumor going around. Hold on, is that making noise? No. Okay. That it's supposed to launch in May. Now, obviously, BlizzCon isn't until October, so it's normally in October. They didn't have it last year. Is that right? Okay. Yeah. So sorry, my bad. BlizzCon is next month. This month, I guess it's February now. This month, and they will announce that. And rumors are suggesting it will launch sometime in May. Which brings me to my original point, which is between now and May, I've got to hit 60 so that I can be ready for Burning Crusade when it launches. I'd like to down Onyxia at level 60 before BC launches, which, if you've never played WoW before, you have no idea what I'm talking about, so don't worry about it. Okay, so now we have talked about, or we've seen the first half of the video on making this little menu here. Now let's watch the second half of this video. Like I said, get brackets opened up if you haven't already. You can download the on the description for the first video. You can download all the assets and everything, and just follow along, because once we go to lab here in just a few minutes, you'll be adding this code to your existing website. So let's hop over and check out the next half of this video.
So, welcome back to the second episode of creating a toggle navigation using JavaScript. Now, in the previous episode, we spent a lot of time setting up the HTML and CSS markup and styling in order to prepare our website for this toggle.
Can I put the videos on Canvas?
Yeah, so we can do it.
Yes, sorry. Or Teams. Teams actually probably the more efficient way to do it. Okay, give me just a half second, and I will throw these up into Teams for you. So, video... share, copy. Oh, I closed Teams, didn't I? Sorry. So here in the project description, or in the video description, he'll have all the project files you should need. This is 131 hybrid.
We're not in 131. Oh yeah, we don't have that in Teams.
Oh yeah. Did that never? No, load up 131. No, you're okay. Pending requests. Guess I haven't fixed that yet. Okay, let's do Canvas then. All right, Canvas modules. Week 3. External URL there, and we'll call it slide out menu part 1.
We're also not in
Yeah, there's something with Teams. I've got a work order out for that. Hopefully they'll fix it here soon.
Oh, Canvas too. We're not in Canvas either.
Yeah, I know. Actually, Micah and I were just talking about that. It's a long story, but hopefully I'm going to get that resolved. So anyway, if you check Canvas now under week 3, oh, you don't have Canvas either. Is that what you're? Okay, Google, or not Google, on YouTube, look up how to create a toggle menu part 1. Okay. The guy's name is Danny Crossing. Crossing with a K. So, yeah, it looks like Ian found it.
I have found it.
Perfect. Excellent. So, if you want to go ahead and grab those, the lesson files out of the... very bottom down there. Hold on a second. Is this... You have to pay for it? You may have to pay. Oh, thank you do. Oh, yeah, you do. Okay, well, don't worry about that then. Sorry, I didn't realize that. I thought I'm confusing it, I guess, with the video that we watched in the last class. I thought he had... No, okay. All right, just follow along to the best of your abilities. At minimum, please don't be playing games. Just have something open, have brackets open so you can at least try to follow along. Have your website open, something like that. Okay, let's hop back over here then and continue with this video.
Navigation we're going to create using JavaScript. So as you can see in front of me here, I do have the project from the previous episode, and what we're going to do in this episode is we're going to add the JavaScript to our website so we can get this sliding open and close effect when it comes to the site navigation. So what we need to do starting out with is we're going to go down to the bottom and link to our main.js file, which is going to be the JavaScript file we're going to write all the JavaScript code inside of. So at the bottom here, right after the body tag or the ending of the body tag, I'm going to go ahead and link to my main.js file. So I'm going to write a script tag and say I want the source to be main.js, since that is the name of my JavaScript file. Now, do note that you don't have to call it main.js. That is a habit that some programmers like to do. Other people like to call it script.js instead. So there's a lot of options here when it comes to naming your JavaScript file. The only reason I call this one main.js is because this is going to be a main JavaScript file that's going to run in this project here. Typically, you do have multiple JavaScript files, some for some pages, some for other pages, some for specific functions. But just know that we're just going to have one main file for this episode here. After linking to the JavaScript file, we need to go into the JavaScript file and start creating the JavaScript code. JavaScript. That will actually go ahead and run this sliding when we want to click the button at the top of the website. By the way, let's actually go ahead and take a look at the website since we haven't seen it since the last episode. Right now, this is what we have from the previous episode. If I were to click this button up here, you can see nothing happens inside the website. What we want to happen is if we were to go back to the finished version of the website, as you can see, it starts opening and closing, which is the effect we want to create using JavaScript. So what that means is that we're gonna manipulate a lot of CSS styling using JavaScript, which is a feature of JavaScript that is used quite often. So inside the main.js file, I am gonna go ahead and start out by creating the code that will actually check if we have the navigation open or closed, since that is something we need to know in order to know if we need to open it or if we need to close it. Now, I do want to mention first, before we write any JavaScript, that there is a lot of ways to create the same feature inside a website. The way that I'm creating it in this episode is just one of 100 different ways you could do it. So if you have another solution for it, then go ahead and test it out and try it out and see if it works. If it does work, then good for you. You got a new method. So I can only applaud that because JavaScript is about finding solutions to a problem. Again, JavaScript is a little bit different than HTML and CSS because you need to think of it in a slightly different way. It's more mathematical than HTML and CSS is, because HTML is just about seeing, well, we have this sort of content, so we need to wrap it around these sort of tags. Whereas JavaScript is, you have this problem and you need to solve it using some kind of solution. So there's a lot of different solutions for it. So what we're going to start out with is we're going to go ahead and check if the navigation is open or closed, because that is important for the code to know in order to know what to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a let type variable, which we talked about in a previous episode. If you don't know what a let variable is, then go ahead and check out my let var and const episode a few episodes ago. We're going to go ahead and create a let variable called toggle nav status, just so you know what exactly the status is. And I'm going to set this equal to a boolean, which means a true or false statement. So right now the navigation is closed as a default, so we want to set this one to false. Or if it makes sense for you, then you can set it to true. Doesn't really matter, we can do whatever we want, but in this example here I'm going to set it to false. Afterwards, I want to create the function that does actually open and close the menu once we click the toggle nav button. So I'm going to create an anonymous function in order to not hoist anything inside the browser. Now this variable up here will actually get hoisted because it's inside the global scope, but it's so tiny that I don't think it's going to matter much in this episode. So we're just going to go ahead and create an anonymous function. So I'm going to say let, and we're going to go ahead and say toggle nav. And again, you can call whatever you want. I'm going to set this one equal to a anonymous function. So we're going to say function, parentheses, curly brackets. Then inside the function here, the first thing I want to do is I want to grab all the different content that we want to use in order to get this working. So what we want to do is we want to manipulate CSS. So we need to grab the elements that we need to change the CSS of inside the website here. So if we were to go back to our index.html, just to take a look at it. So if I remember correctly, I do think the nav sidebar had a width set to 50 pixels inside my CSS styling. So what we want to do is when I do actually click the button to open up the navigation, I want to change the width of the sidebar to something that does actually fit all the content we have down here inside the sidebar. So we're going to grab the navigation or the sidebar, and then we're going to tell it using JavaScript to change the CSS styling so we have a a broader width inside the sidebar. So inside the main.js file, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say we have a variable or a let variable that I want to call get sidebar. Now, just FYI, when we grab something in any sort of programming language, we usually use the keyword get in front of the name so we know what we're talking about. And if you want to change something, we call it set something. And this is not something you have to do. This is just something that is a habit of programmers to do. So just FYI. So afterwards, we want to set it equal to the actual HTML element we have inside the index page. Now, the way we grab that is not something we have actually had a lesson on in this course here, but it's something we will have a lesson on soon when we do get to talk about how to manipulate content inside a website. So we're sort of learning something prematurely here. Now, when I want to grab something inside my index file, right now my main.js file is part of the index file because I linked to it down here at the bottom, meaning that if I want to change something inside this document here, I can refer to this document. So inside my, right after the equal sign, I can say we have a document, which is the index.html page because we linked to it, punctuation, and then I want to do something inside this document. What I want to do is I want to use a JavaScript method called query selector, which is a method we can use in order to grab HTML items from inside our website and all the content in between the HTML tags, of course. So what I want to do is in between the parentheses, I want to say double quotes, and then I want to write what we want to grab. Right now I want to get the sidebar, and I do believe it was called class nav-sidebar. Let's actually double check that to make sure we don't get errors. Yes, that's what we call it. Now do notice that inside the parentheses we refer to classes with punctuations, and IDs are going to be hashtags. So it's sort of the same as inside CSS styling. So the next thing we want to grab, we can actually just go ahead and copy paste this because we're going to do something similar. The next thing we're going to grab is going to be the actual unordered list inside the sidebar, because right now the unordered list inside the CSS file is hidden. We can actually go ahead and go down and check for that just to show you. So right now you can see the visibility is set to hidden because we don't want to see the content when we haven't clicked the button yet. So it's hidden inside the browser. So what I want to do is I want to actually activate it. So I want to grab the UL and change that CSS styling. So we're going to grab the get sidebar UL for unordered lists. Again, that's just the way I decided to name it. And then I want to grab something from inside the index page, and I want to grab the nav sidebar space UL. So in the same way as inside CSS styling, you can also create a path. So you can say the unordered list inside the sidebar, if that makes sense. So we're going to go and grab the next item here. And again, there's just a few CSS things we need to change from inside the styling. The next thing I want to change is going to be the title inside my, inside the sidebar. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the title. And I'm going to go ahead and set this one to sidebar span. Because inside the index page, we decide to wrap our title inside span tags and the rest of the content down here inside anchor tags because they're links, of course. So the next thing we need to do is we need to grab the links inside the sidebar. So we're going to go ahead and copy paste. If I can actually see my keyboard, it's hidden behind the microphone. And we're going to go ahead and change it from title to just A, I guess. We can also call it links. That might make more sense. And I'm going to go ahead and change the path in here to an anchor tag. Now, right now we do actually have a problem here because the query selector that we used only selects one element from inside the website. Meaning that if we were to take a look at the index page, you can see that we have many different anchor tags inside the website here. But it's only going to select one, which means that it's only going to grab the first one in here. So how do we get all the anchor tags and group them together inside a variable? Well, the way we do that is by using something called query selector all. And what query selector all does is that it grabs all the instances of this specific path that we wrote in here, which means that we have all the anchor tags inside the sidebar, and it takes all of them and puts them inside an array for us to use later. Now, if you don't know what an array is, I do recommend you go back and check out my array episode, since arrays are pretty important when it comes to JavaScript and we do use them all the time. So do go check that one out if you're a little bit confused about arrays. Now, I will also link in the description, of course, just so you have it somewhere. So now that we have this, the next thing we need to do is we need to actually do something to the CSS styling depending on this variable we have up here. So I'm going to go down to the next line, just a couple ones down, so we can actually separate our code a little bit. And I'm going to create an if statement. Now, this if statement is going to check if the toggle nav status is equal to false or equal to true. So I'm going to grab it here, and I'm going to check, is it equal to false? Then do what is inside the curly brackets here. So before we change any CSS using JavaScript, I do want to sort of think about what I want to change first inside the website. Because remember, a JavaScript document gets read from top to bottom inside the browser. So we need to think about what I want to change first inside the CSS styling. And again, in this specific example here, it's not really going to matter. But in some examples or some projects, it might matter the way that you read certain JavaScript code. So do think about this before you just start typing in JavaScript code inside something like a function here. Now, my example here, the first thing I want to change is going to be the unordered list inside the sidebar. And again, you can do in whatever order you want to. I just think that it's better to actually show the content before we actually start sliding the width and that sort of thing. So I'm going to grab the sidebar from up here that does actually refer to the actual sidebar from inside the HTML document. And using a style property that is built into JavaScript, I'm going to tell it that I want to change a certain styling inside the style sheet. So I'm going to say we have a style property by saying dot style. In the same way as if we were to take the length of a certain string, we would use dot length. We're going to use dot style. And I want to say dot and then the property inside the style sheet that I want to change. So in this example here, I want to change the visibility because right now it's set to hidden. So I want to change the visibility and set it equal to double quotes, semicolon, and I want to set it equal to visible. Which means that now if I were to actually click something inside the browser, or click something, if I were to click the button inside the browser, then it does actually show the sidebar inside, or the content inside the sidebar. Now, before we do the next thing, we do need to change something inside the style sheet that we forgot to do in the previous episode, which is to set the opacity of the title and the links to 0, because I want them to be invisible and then fade to visible when we do actually open the sidebar. So inside the style sheet down at the bottom, I do want to change the span and the links to having a opacity set to 0. So I want to say opacity set to 0. There we go. And now if we were to go back into the main.js file, we can go down to the next line and refer to the title and say we want to style it. I want to style the opacity and I want to set it equal to 1. Actually not 1, because the title is going to be slightly transparent, at least I think so, because it looks nicer. So I'm going to change it to 0.5. There we go. Now, the next part is going to be a little bit more difficult because the title and the UL and the sidebar are just one HTML item we grab from inside the index page. Now, I think the best way to sort of explain the loop is just by creating one and then explaining as I'm creating it. So on the next line here, I'm going to first of all create a variable that is going to be a let variable that is going to tell us how many times do we want to run the loop inside the code. So I'm going to say array length, because what we want to do is we want to run the loop just as many times as we have indexes inside our array, which means that whatever number of links we have inside the array, if that makes sense. So I'm going to set it equal to, and then I'm going to grab the get sidebar links dot length, because remember when we have an array, again from the array episode, when we have an array and we use the dot length property, then we get the number of indexes that we have inside the array. So this is how we get the number here. Afterwards, I want to create a for loop. Now a for loop right now, it might seem very confusing because I just created a standard loop really quickly. We're saying that we have a for loop. Inside the parentheses, we have 3 pieces of information. First of all, we have a variable, which we're going to go and change to let, because we don't want to use variable, which is going to be a starting number of the loop. So right now we have 0 as our starting number, and each time we run the loop, it's going to increase 1, which means that the next time it's going to be 1, then it's going to be 2, then it's going to be 3, and when we get to a certain number, I want it to stop looping. So right now we start at 0, and then I want to say we want to run it until we have I, which is the variable here that's equal to 0. Once I hits a certain number, it needs to stop looping. So I want to stop it once we reach the same number of indexes as we have inside the array. So it's not going to loop more times than we have links inside the array. So it's going to stop once I is smaller than the array length. And each time we run the loop, we want it to increase by 1, which is what we use here with the I++ icon. And again, we also talked about I++ in the previous episode. So this is what happens inside a loop. So inside the loop here, what I want to do is I want to go ahead and grab the sidebar links again. And what I want to do is I want to say, well, we want to grab the first array index inside the array, which is going to be the first link, and change the CSS styling of it. So I want to grab the first index, and again, this shouldn't be new because this is just how we grab an index from inside an array, again from the array episode. I want to grab I, because right now I is equal to 0, which means that we're grabbing the 0 index inside the array, which is the first index. Because remember, inside programming, we don't start at 1, we always start at 0. So the first index inside the array is going to be 0. So I is equal to 0, which means that the first time we loop, we're going to grab the first index. Then the next time we loop, I is going to change to 1, because remember I said that it's going to increase by 1 each time, which means that automatically in the next loop, we're going to grab the next index inside the array. That's a kind of cool way of doing it. So inside of here, I want to grab the style property, which means I'm going to do something to the first link inside the CSS file. Then I want to change something. I want to change the opacity. And I want to set it equal to 1. There we go. And that is basically all we need to do here with the loop. That's it. So I hope it didn't confuse you too much when we talked about loops. So on the next line here, the next thing I want to do as the final thing inside this if statement is I want to change my toggle nav status, which we have up here, to true. Because I don't want it to run the same if statement again if we were to click the button. So it needs to change to true. And then we're going to create a second if else statement that is going to run basically the same code but in a different order. So I'm going to say we want to change the nav status or toggle nav status and set it equal to true. We're not going to check if it's equal to, we're actually going to set it equal to, otherwise we're going to get an error. And there we go. Now, before we create the if-else statement, I do want to test out if this function actually works inside the browser. So before we actually go into the browser and run it, what I want to do is I want to go inside the index page, because right now we don't actually run the function once we click the button, and we need to change that inside the index page. So inside our button that we have up here, which is called button toggle nav, I'm going to go ahead and create an attribute that's going to be called onClick. Now, onClick is a built-in JavaScript attribute inside the browser. So if you use the onClick name inside as an attribute, it's going to mean that when you click this item, something is going to happen. And what I want to happen is I want to run the JavaScript function we created inside the main.js file. So we grab the function name, or in this case, the anonymous function, which is called toggle nav. And I'm going to go ahead and refer to it inside my onClick event here. Again, we're going to go and talk about events a lot more in the future, but for now, just know that this is a onClick event, which means that when the user interacts with the website in a certain way, then we do something using JavaScript. So we're going to run this function when the user clicks the button. So now I can actually go inside my website, refresh it, and if I were to click the button, you can see that we now open up the menu. It didn't slide open like the other example, but we're going to go and fix that once we're done with the actual function. But as you can see, it does actually work. If I were to click the button again, you can see nothing happens. And that's because we need to create the if-else statement that will do the opposite in order to close it back down again. So inside our main.js file, we're going to go ahead and copy the if statement, and we're going to go ahead and paste it below here. Then I'm going to go and change it to a if-else statement. And what we want to do in here is we want to first of all not check if the toggle nav status is false, but we need to check if it's true inside the function here. And what we want to do at the bottom here is I want to change it to false once we're done running this specific if-else statement. So the first time we run the function inside the website is going to go through the function and check if toggle nav status is equal to false or if it's equal to true. And if it's equal to false, then it's going to run the first if statement. And if it's equal to true, then it's going to run the second if-else statement down here. And then it's going to just switch around, alternating between the two each time we click the button. So inside the if-else statement, we're going to change a couple of things, because we first of all want to set our style for the width to 50 pixels, because that was the default styling inside our CSS file. So we're basically just changing everything back to the default styling. And I do also want to change the visibility, not up here. Again, that's just a choice that I decided to not do inside my code. And I want to do it down at the bottom instead, right before we do actually change the toggle nav status, because that's the order I think is better for this example here. We're also going to go and change the opacity for the title, so we're going to set it to 0. And the same thing goes for the navigation links down here. We're going to set them to 0, and the visibility is going to be hidden. And we do need to change one more thing, because I just noticed that I switched around on the if-else statement here, so we're going to change them to else if. And then we're going to go and go inside the browser, refresh it. Then when we click the button, you can see it opens up. Then when I click it again, it's going to close back down again. So now we do actually have a toggle navigation working, but the navigation is not really animated yet. We want it to slide open and fade in and then fade back out again. And we do that using pure CSS. So we don't actually need to do that using JavaScript. So inside the CSS file, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to the bottom here. And the different elements that we grabbed using JavaScript, we're going to add a transition to them. So where we have the sidebar, which is the first one, I'm going to say we have a transition. Inside the transition, I'm going to say we want to animate everything. So we're going to say all. Then I want to set it to something like 0.3 seconds, which is 300 milliseconds in duration. And I want to say I want to ease in and out. And I'm just going to go ahead and copy what I have here. And I'm going to go ahead and paste it down to the other styling. So the UL we have here is just going to be, well, we don't actually need to do anything to this one because it's not going to transition. But the links down here and the title is going to transition. So now that we added all the transitions to the CSS styling, we can actually go inside the browser and test it out. So inside the browser, if we were to refresh and click the button, you can see it fades in and slides out. If we were to click it again, you can see it does the exact same thing the other way around. So now we do actually have a toggle navigation working inside our browser here. So I hope you had a lot of fun creating this project with me, since I know that JavaScript can be a little bit tough to swallow, especially coming directly from HTML and CSS, since it's a slightly different mindset you need to have when you want to create JavaScript code compared to HTML markup. But I hope this project could sort of enlighten you in seeing how we could actually use JavaScript inside a website and how we can use it to manipulate the content inside a website. Now, in the next couple episodes, we're going to talk about something called objects inside JavaScript, which is something used quite often when we do JavaScript inside our websites, since JavaScript is actually what we call an object-oriented programming language, even though coming from another language that is also object-oriented. You might think that JavaScript is a little bit sloppy when it comes to the way we use it, but never mind that. We're just going to go ahead and talk about how JavaScript can be used as an object-oriented programming language in the next couple of lessons. So I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Okay, so that's it as far as videos that I have for you today. Now, what you're gonna do is, to reiterate, is what he just did, but you're gonna change the background color of your page. Again, if you're adding this to your existing website, as I've asked you to do, you should already have this done. Change the font of the nav bar, change the image for the button, which, since I was incorrect, and I thought he had a direct link to the assets, so you'll have to find you a button, right, to use. And add drop-down items to the nav bar. Again, should be already part of your website. Any questions, concerns, comments, thoughts, ideas? Okay, so if you are lost and confused, if you're not sure how to approach this, I'll try to get the problem figured out with Canvas, but I'm going to put a link to both his HTML and CSS tutorial playlist. That way you can go back and refresh yourself on some of the skills and kind of walk yourself through some of those things. This will be due next Monday, so you'll have a week to do it. I think it's fully within everyone's capabilities. If, like I said, if for some reason you struggle with it, I have everybody here at least twice a week, so let me know or send me an email or something like that. All right, so go ahead and get brackets opened up if you don't already, and get started on making this thing